speed it up and have the chords only 2 beats, and you get that's like that song Sherry that I mentioned earlier, Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons. And then you've got down, down, up, down, up, down, up, just a slight variation of that. And a million other strums, other time signatures we could be in. This is endless, the different kinds of rhythms you can apply to a basic chord progression like this. But hopefully those made sense to you. I will make some tabs available. I'll make all the strums, all the chord voicings, some of the techniques too that I do available to you with a link down below to my Patreon page where you can go and download all of this stuff. So let's move on now and look at how you would change the chords in that basic progression to get it to be a little bit more varied, a little fancier, maybe a little deeper. You can take the C chord, the original C chord that we played, and make it a C major 7, which a lot of jazz musicians do. That's a very common thing to do. Make the A minor chord into an A minor 7, which is a very easy chord to play. You know that A minor 7 is just 0, 0, 0, 0. It's also known as C6, but in this case we're calling it A minor 7. So C major 7, which is on the 2nd fret instead of the 3rd fret like a C chord is. And then instead of just plain old F, let's make it D minor. Those two chords are very related, and we'll talk about the music theory behind that some other time. But just know that F and D minor only have one little note different about them, and so they're pretty interchangeable. So in this case, we're swapping out F for D minor. And then instead of plain old G, let's use G7. So just by sticking a 7 on the end of a chord, oftentimes that makes it sound a little bit fancier. So our new chords again were C major 7, A minor 7, D minor instead of F, and G7 instead of plain old G. Here's all of that put together with, let's use our original down up strum. That gives you just a slightly more sophisticated sound. Then you can go further and further, as jazz musicians do. They do a lot of substitutions, and they add a lot of extended notes onto plain chords. And that's something we'll dive into a little bit today, but not go too far. But if you really want to hear that kind of stuff, just put on anything by, say, Bill Evans, or put on anything by Miles Davis or Thelonious Monk, and you'll hear a lot of these standard chord progressions, these Tin Pan Alley Broadway show tune chord progressions spiffed up and made into modern jazz. It's really interesting to hear what they do to very basic chords. We're not going to go quite that far, but let's learn a couple of the tricks that we can learn from 20th century jazz. One of those tricks is to take the 6th chord, which normally is an A minor or an A minor 7, and make it into a dominant 7. Turn it into an A7 chord. That gives you this. Very common jazz thing to do also in just plain old pop music that doesn't have a lot of jazz in it, but maybe has a touch of jazz harmony. Some Beatles songs and stuff like that. You'll get that A7 chord instead of an A minor. So that's a really easy thing to do. That's not too terribly advanced, but let's do something that's a little bit more adventurous. Let's take that A7 chord and add a 9th to it, not the 9th being the note B. So that's an A9 chord, 0, 1, 0, 2. It's a little spiffier. Let's see what that sounds like. So that just adds a little bit more richness to it. And it adds a little motion if you take that 9th and then change it back to the regular note, the root. That really adds a little bit of movement in there. And so you're not really just sitting on a static chord, but you got stuff constantly moving. And that can make your playing sound a lot richer, a lot more complex. Alright, let's go a little bit further with this. So instead of just a plain old 9, instead of an A9 chord, let's make it an A7 flat 9 chord. And that's a very jazzy thing to do. And that's a very different sound. So let's see what all that sounds like if I swap out A7 flat 9 for our regular A7. Definitely getting closer to jazz by throwing that little flat 9 chord in there. So there's yet another thing we can do to it. The chord D minor is all well and good, but it's kind of jazzier if you add a 7th to that. In fact, you can add a 7th to any one of these chords. And so by making it D minor 7, that's a pretty cool sound. Let's see how that all works with our, along with our A7 flat 9 too. Really steering this towards jazz now. And so a lot of jazz standards that use the 1-6-2-5 or the 1-6-4-5 do these kind of substitutions, taking a very plain chord and making it a little fancier sounding. And then modern jazz from the 1950s on went even further, went way out there, adding all kinds of stuff to these chords, so it barely resembles the original progression. But we're not going to quite go there today. That's above and beyond the scope of this video.